Okay, so here we have the respondent's actual product usage.
Yeah, so the products was actually one of my favorite sections, and it wouldn't be unusual for me to actually skip to the product section
Mhm.
and then go back and read the memo from the start. Because I come from an area of activity and so it really helps me orient myself when I'm seeing kind of the product stuff. And what we tried to do was to hit the right level of granularity and the right level of presentation. So I wanted to. I didn't want data dump stuff, and I used to get really frustrated if people were like having such precise numbers. Like no one thinks in terms of like pennies in correspondent banking. I want to know, are they moving $100 million a month through that sort of thing? I don't need to know down to a penny. Um, but also the product usage, and then we would have things like, is it distributed, and top transactors and that sort of thing. And you also have to look at all the products, not just simply third party wires. So we would always try to do that. And you know a lot of what we were looking at was the counterparties of the customers in
Right.
the respondents, because that gave us geography, and it gave us some other things. So the product section and the activity section were very, very important to me. And you have to remember, a lot of these customers on the memos that I'm reading, I'd had compliance calls with them, and I'd reviewed their activity reviews that we talked about, or whatever. So, there's sort of a cumulative familiarity, uh, that you're doing. And then you're looking at the transaction traits. If I'm looking at a lot of low dollar, high volume activity, I will view that a lot differently than a bunch of high value stuff from a single state owned enterprise and that sort of thing.
Right. And I
Um,
remember you mentioning, sorry, I remember you mentioning at the beginning of this, course, that we are assuming that the audience will have sufficient knowledge about international payment and how that's handled internationally, and so I think that these are some of the basic information or knowledge that the risk team or the decision makers should have.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually that kind of gets into the pageantry. I remember when I was first looking at relationship memos when I arrived at the bank, I would see a whole paragraph, that was cut and paste from our examiner handbook explaining what a wire transfer was, or
Yeah.
what cash was, or whatever, international cash letter or something. And my response is, if you don't understand what a wire is, you shouldn't be reading this memo. And you shouldn't be taking up space putting it in there. I mean, to me, that was an indicator of a very unsophisticated, not purposeful program. So, yes, the
Yeah.
expectation was that if you're reading this memo, we needed to do enough training for you so that you understood it. We wouldn't be training you through the relationship memo. And as you well know, we brought everybody in on the business side uh, to San Francisco to go
Yes,
through a week-long course on risk. Well,
absolutely.
we did the same thing with the risk people, uh, including second line risk, explaining the products and stuff to them. And we spent an awful lot of time training them on what the products were doing. We didn't expect them to get that from the relationship memos. We had training that would flesh that
Right.
out.
And that's an excellent point, Tom, because I think that many AML programs, internationally reputed AML programs, do not really cover the importance of understanding the different products, international products. And I think that the training that I was absolutely I had the opportunity of attending those trainings were absolutely one of the best trainings that, I think we've ever attended.
Well, and it was a two-way street. We were learning from all of the attendees as well. Oftentimes, it was the first time that I had met the relationship teams or whatever, and then obviously we'd get to know each other as we traveled. But uh, it was a great way of aligning to make sure that we're all trying to solve a joint problem, not that we were having these artificial handoffs from one silo to another.
Right. Do you feel that, in many countries, like they have AML conferences, whether, industry wide or within their organization, uh, how do you think that, I mean, the participation of business people would add value, for this kind of organizational events?
Well, I guess pretty obvious from our previous discussion.
Yeah,
I actually think the business people are essential, and quite frankly, in the in a who do you bank, who don't you bank, and how do you tell the difference on the first two categories, certainly, and to some extent the third category, the business people are better off doing that. So, from my perspective, if I had a choice to have a discussion with a senior business person or a senior compliance person, while I'd want both, I'd rather, if I could only have one, I'd rather be a senior business
senior
person with my
business.
respondent bank. Um, and
Sure.
so, for
Great.
me,
Hmm.
the business people understand the customer base. So,
Yeah,
that's the best place for me to go.
great.
And the other thing is, if you have these trainings where you just have a bunch of backroom people talking about abstract checklist or whatever, you're going to miss the point. I mean,
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
98% or 99% of the activity that goes through these banks is manifestly benign. And you know
Mm,
what it looks like. If you don't understand the benign, you're never going to be able to detect the risky stuff.
such an important point. I think that's absolutely wisdom. Thank you so much, Tom.